So, you want to talk about absolutely everything? Well, you can't. A while back, I released a video on how to narrow your topic. By the looks of some of the things I've seen, though, some of you still have questions like, how in the hell do I do that? Well, now I know sometimes you just want to talk about absolutely everything, but you just can't. You can't get away with that in academic writing because we need a certain amount of focus. Not that focus, but really when you're thinking about subjects, you should think about the funnel a little bit. You might be interested in a broad amount of things, but it needs to get narrowed down. You need to pick that one specific thing you're interested in. Because sometimes interesting is the most unusual, most notable, and frankly coolest sounding thing. Fish as a topic, kind of dull. Catfish noodling as an extreme sport? You should really look this one up. It's pretty darn cool. So how do you do this? How do you move from a big subject that there's tons of stuff to write about to something that's a bit more narrow and specific? Well, two suggestions in this video. The first, find someone with whom you disagree. Say there's a subject that you're interested in. Say the bill that is, as of the filming of this video, being discussed in committee in the state of Ohio, which would ban colleges from discussing diversity, climate change, and doing a whole bunch of other things. It's a pretty big topic, and the bill does do a lot of things, like it would ban striking or demonstrations. Diversity training? Yeah, that would be banned too. Working with Chinese universities for some reason would be banned. And the things that would go on in a classroom would also have a bunch of real restrictions on them. The primary function of an institution must be to practice or support the practice, discovery, improvement, transmission, and dissemination of knowledge by means of research, teaching, discussion, and debate. Sounds fine. Intellectual diversity. Institutions must ensure the fullest degree of intellectual diversity. What does that mean? No indoctrination. Institutions must encourage students, faculty, or staff to form their own conclusions about controversial matters. Faculty and staff must not inculcate any points of view, which on its own doesn't sound horrible if all we're doing is talking about facts. But if there's debate, say the bill technically means you really couldn't talk about, say, the abortion pill if you were a medical student, which seems kind of extreme, telling medical students what medications they can talk about or not. It also means that you couldn't talk about, say, LGBTQ rights if you were a social work student. Kind of makes you wonder a little bit. Anyway, we could go on with a lot of examples, but just know that there are tons of them. And lots of people have very strong feelings about this bill that's working its way through the Ohio Congress. Many newspapers, many institution-based newspapers, and many independent newspapers have talked about how this could change Ohio's educational system for the worst. There have been protests. More than 100 people spoke out against a massive Ohio education bill during a marathon meeting. And there are a bunch of these going on. However, we have to admit there are more than one side to the stories, and there are people, obviously, who would support such a plan of action, or it wouldn't be going through Congress. And you can find examples of people who have strong feelings about it. So if you're interested in the Ohio State Bill 83, how would you go about writing it? Find someone with whom you disagree. Just pick one. Doesn't matter whom. Well, it does matter whom, but if you pick one, you focus your argument on a specific take, like, say, this guy's. Ohio Senate Bill 83 would protect free speech on campus, not the reverse, George W. Dent Jr. And George W. Dent Jr. isn't just some guy who looks a little bit like Colonel Sanders. He is a fairly reputable lawyer, professor emeritus of law at Case Western. He's got some skills. But that doesn't mean you couldn't disagree with him. And doing so would be legitimate academic discourse. So that's one method of narrowing down a subject. Let's go for another option. If there's a trend going on, find the worst example of the larger trend and focus on that. Or the most extreme, or the most interesting, or the funniest, or whatever you want to do. But finding one example that jumps out to you can help you get a focus on a larger issue. Say you're interested in politicians. And you have the very novel idea that there might be some corrupt politicians. Oh no, really? Would there be corrupt politicians? Well, find a specific example. Say, for instance, George Soros, the congressional district representative from the 3rd District of New York. Is he an easy target? Well, yeah, but he's also a notable one because not only is he an active member of the House of Representatives, he is the first Republican who's LGBTQ who has been elected. So, how could he be an example of being dishonest? Well, he has admitted to lying about his background in order to get elected. His resume has a whole lot of bits in it that later we found aren't true. He lied about his college and career, which we found out after the New York Times tried to hunt down his school records, and neither institution he claimed had anything about him. He claimed to be a Wall Street executive working at Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs never have anything about him. He claimed he was robbed of his rent money. New York Police Department has no record of that at all. He claimed he was a producer of a Spider-Man Broadway play. Why, I don't know, but there's no record of that one. He claimed to be very active in charity, particularly in an animal rights group, which there aren't very many records of that one either. He allegedly stole money from donations for a veteran's dying service dog, and it just keeps going and going. He claimed that his mother was an executive who was a victim of the World Trade Center attack. Well, later on they found out that the only employment records they can find was that she was a domestic worker, not a financial executive. He claimed that his grandparents fled the Holocaust. Genealogy records don't corroborate that at all. He claimed that he lost 4 employees at the Pulse shooting, and there were no records of that. So yes, he's a dishonest politician. And it is important that he's dishonest because he's a politician, so there's a built-in level of significance there. Now, could you find other examples of dishonest politicians? Well, of course you could, but you just end up having to pick one. And I picked Santos not because I thought he stood out in any number of ways, but because it is current. As of the filming of this video, he has been charged by the Justice Department in a federal probe. A 13-count indictment has been returned by a federal grand jury, 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 2 counts of making materially false statements to the House of Representatives, 1 count of theft of public funds, which was actually lying about unemployment benefits. And today, just 3 hours ago, he admitted to theft in Brazil court. So why not write about him? Now I know what you're thinking, but I really wanted to cover this and this and this. Well, here's the thing. Just because you can't cover everything in the history of the world in the paper you're working on now doesn't mean you can't come back to it. You can always write other papers. You're still early in your college career, and there's still lots of opportunities for you to come back and address that thought that you didn't have time and space to do it here. There are other options, but keeping this particular paper, the one you're working on now, narrow and focused, is going to mean that it's going to be that much easier for your readers to get your point, which is going to make you look like an awesome writer. And that's what we're here for, right? Well, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.